Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Lauren Perry. I'm Operations Manager at Syngap1 and a Syngap parent. Our presentation today is titled Cure ID, a Treatment Registry of Repurposed Drugs for Syngap1. Pleased to introduce today's speaker, Heather Stone. Heather is a health science policy analyst at the FDA in the Office of Medical Policy within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. She's led the Cure ID program since 2013, which is a joint FDA and NIH NCATS initiative focused on drug repurposing and innovation in clinical trial design for diseases with high unmet medical needs like SYNGAP1. A recorded version of this webinar will be available on our website under webinars on the news and events menu. And at the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So please write your questions in the Q&A at any time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for joining. We really appreciate it. This is a really exciting webinar for our community. I'm just going to say a few words before Heather starts. Cure ID is a great opportunity for our community to share their experience with drugs and treatments that they've tried. This is part of our repurposing program, so please pay attention. And if you have tried treatments, whether it worked or didn't work, please go to Cure ID and share your experience. It's going to benefit our community, but also the overall rare disease community. So this is great opportunity to learn how to share your experience. This is one of the other great way where the patient voice is needed. And we love that the FDA and IH is listening and creating a platform for you to share your experience. So Heather is going to show us how it works. I did it, and she's working. She's helping me figure it out. So you should see some of the case reports in Syngap already. There's one created. You can already go in there and see Syngap one case report. It should be too soon,
Yours
but
is
you can check it
now.
out. Oh, perfect. There you go. So Heather, thanks for joining our community and sharing Cure ID with us.
Thank you so much, Virginie. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell you about the platform and hope that it's something that can be really a resource for the entire community and hopefully can help find treatments that are helpful for patients with SYNGAP1 as well as treatments that are not helpful so that they don't continue to be prescribed. So I will share my screen, and what I'll do is just go through a series of slides to tell you a little bit about the platform, some of our sort of success cases, and then happy to do a quick demo of the website if that's useful to just show you some of the tips and tricks, and then we'll take any questions you all have. So please do write them down as we go. Right. Is the slide being shared? Okay.
It's loading. Perfect.
Okay. All right, so Cure ID is your opportunity to share and explore treatment experiences for SYNGAP1 as well as other rare diseases. And our goal is really to turn treatment insights into action. So what is Cure? It's a website and mobile app. You can go to cure.ncats.io and there's a QR code on the next screen, or download the mobile app from the App or Play Store. That was developed as a collaboration between FDA and NIH, specifically NCATS. And the goal is to collect and learn from treatment experiences of healthcare providers as well as patients and their care partners. I like to think of it as a treatment registry where we're collecting information on all of the treatments that are being tried in the community. And it features efficacy data for these treatments that are tried when we just don't have good approved treatment options. So the strategy is essentially to crowdsource experiences, in this case for SYNGAP1, and it's focused on the use of repurposed drugs or drugs that are used off-label to treat SYNGAP1 and the symptoms associated with it. Our objective is primarily to identify signals of potentially safe and effective treatments that can then be studied further in appropriate trials and studies. It's important to note that this information is hypothesis generating. It's unlikely that we're going to confirm for sure whether a drug works or not based on anecdotal reports. But what we do think can happen is, just like we collect safety information where a person reports that they had an adverse event or a side effect from a medication, and that leads to further study of that drug, this can serve in the same function where you and members of your community, as well as clinicians, report that you experienced either a drug that was helpful or a drug that didn't help, or perhaps even caused harm. We hope not. And that can help us sort of pinpoint where we should be focusing further studies to really understand whether these are effective treatments or not. In some cases, FDA might consider the data collected in CureID to be what we call supportive data as part of a labeling application. But this is case specific and is not guaranteed. It was really meant more to be in the hypothesis generation vein, but we hope that we can explore how this data can be used for regulatory purposes, but that will be limited. And anytime this would be in addition to an adequate and well-controlled study, because that's the regulatory requirement, and we don't want to lower the bar for evidence, because we want to make sure that whatever treatments we find are safe and effective for the patients with SYNGAP. So, but that being said, we do recognize that this can serve as an important source of information for both clinicians as well as patients and caregivers, where there may be no FDA-approved treatments yet available. So the primary functionalities of the platform are the ability to share your treatment share your treatment experience and expertise, and to explore what others have tried. To share your treatment experience, you first create an account, and we do ask you to register on the platform. And the reason that we do that was actually demonstrated by Virginia earlier, which was that sometimes we have to reach out to you to ask you a question. So in one case, somebody had forgotten to enter the outcome information, and so we couldn't approve the case without it. So we would send an email saying, thank you so much for submitting your case. We realized that you missed out clicking a button here and need to add this information. Please add that so that your case can be approved. And so by having your email contact, we're able to reach out to you if necessary. And it also enables you to save and edit your case over time, or to save it and come back to it if you're not ready to submit it right away. Once you've created an account, then you select create and case report from the menu, and you're able to fill out what we call the case report form, which is essentially a treatment survey, by just answering a series of questions and then submitting the form. And it is important that you actually click submit, because otherwise we can't prove it. And then once submitted, your case is reviewed by a member of our team. We are primarily looking to make sure that what is recommended is not dangerous, and that what is being shared does not include personally identifiable information. So we want to be sure that your privacy and that of your children is being protected. And so all of the information entered needs to be de-identified, and it should be entered that way to begin with, but we do a check to make sure. But just as you can enter this information, you can also explore what others have tried. So you can choose a disease, and you can locate, sorry, this says therapeutic area, but it's supposed to be that you can locate rare genetic disorders from the therapeutic areas of focus, and then select SYNGAP1 as your disease of interest. And then that allows you to view all of the case reports that have been contributed by patients, their caregivers, healthcare providers, as well as in some cases those that have been extracted from published literature or from electronic health records. You can then see the data in aggregate, so you can see all of the drugs that have been tried, as well as the outcomes that patients experienced with those drugs for particular symptoms. You can also filter. So if you, for example, want to see only those cases that had treatment in a patient less than 2 years of age, you could do that. So what this offers is an opportunity for healthcare providers, as well as patients and caregivers, to have a mechanism to really rapidly share their treatment experiences with the global clinical community. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is a global initiative. Anyone, anywhere in the world can contribute their case or explore the data that have been submitted by others. We collect the data in a way that enables it to be sort of immediately aggregated. So, many people say, well, I've shared my experience on Facebook or, or in a community on Twitter, and that's fantastic. And that is a really important mechanism for sharing amongst patients, for example. But it can be very difficult for researchers and clinicians to access that information. And even if they can see it, they can't necessarily analyze it. And so this is a platform that enables you to share the information in a way that really helps to facilitate research and analysis so that we can get the answers that we need about potential treatments. I think one of the most important things and something that makes this platform very unique is that the data is made completely openly accessible to everyone for free in near real time. So you submit a case, I or somebody on my team reviews it, typically within like 24 hours, but as quickly as possible. And then as soon as we hit approve, it becomes public and anyone can see it. And so most places require you to jump through a lot of hoops to get access to the information, even when they say that the data is openly accessible. The definitions of data sharing that are open can vary quite widely. And so this is one where you actually don't even have to register on the site to view the information. Anyone can see it. And I hope that that really helps to make this accessible to a wider range of individuals, and to not put up barriers to people accessing this really important information when they're already struggling with trying to find a treatment that works for themselves or their children. And then we do try to ensure some level of quality by having all of the cases be reviewed before they're posted publicly, and also, trying to ensure that no dangerous recommendations are shared. So here's just an example of some of the kinds of information that would be collected for a case of SYNGAP1. And this is based on an actual case that was reported on the platform that you can go and see. I've changed it a little bit to add some details, but it's the general gist is the same. And you can add more or less information depending upon what suits you. So at a minimum, the data that is required is a disease, and in this case, a symptom or what we call a presentation, a drug, and an outcome. However, you need lots and lots of cases of just a symptom, drug, and outcome for that information to really be meaningful, and you're always going to be lacking a lot of detail. And so we encourage people to add additional information, such as, the baseline characteristics of the patient and their demographics, what the clinical presentation looked like, how the diagnosis was made so that people can assess whether they really are certain that the patient had the disease that was being treated. In the case of the rare genetic disorders and gene mutations, as well as nucleotide and protein changes. And this is particularly important when we start thinking about targeted therapies that might be, and precision medicine that might be able to help with specific mutations. And then the details of the medication, the more information you can provide about the dose that was used and the concomitant medications, as well as any adverse events, the richer that data is. And then the outcome, and this is what you or your loved one perceives the outcome of the treatment to be, but also how that marker, what was the marker of improvement or worsening. And then you have an option to upload any images or documents. Perhaps you are not sure how to enter the information about the gene mutations and the genomic information. You can upload your genetic testing report. Or if you want to upload a medical image or something like that, sometimes people upload x-rays or MRI images. So there are various options for things that you can include. So we often get asked to talk about an example of where this platform has actually really been useful. And I think the most telling example is a case which may seem a little strange because it's actually a rare infectious disease. But I think once you hear the story, you'll understand why I'm telling you about it. So there is a horrible infection that is caused by what's literally a brain-eating amoeba called Balamuthia mandrilaris. And when it causes severe meningitis and encephalitis, which is most cases in the US, it has a fatality rate of over 90%. There's really no effective treatment. The CDC gets involved in every case and they basically throw the kitchen sink at people based on a case series from Peru in which some patients survived. There have only ever been 200 cases or so ever reported in the published literature. So it's very, very rare and very hard to diagnose. A researcher named Joe DeRisi at UCSF, who we lovingly refer to as the mad scientist, saw a patient die of balloneuthia and saw what actually happened to the patient's brain and decided that he never wanted to see that happen to somebody again. And so he and his lab sought to find a treatment that would be effective for balloneuthia. And much to my surprise, at least, he sort of found one, at least preclinically in this high throughput drug screening. He identified a drug named nitroxaline, which is not actually approved in the US. So it's not what we typically think of as a repurposed drug, but it is approved in Europe. And it's been approved by the European Medicines Agency for 50 years for urinary tract infections. It's a quinolone antibiotic, which is a very common class of antibiotics that are approved in the US. And it's actually currently being studied for like bladder cancer. But this chart, shows that it had kind of like off the chart amoebicidal activity in this preclinical drug screen that nobody had ever recognized. Nobody had ever thought to use this for an amoeba. And you can see in the blue dots, all of the drugs that we currently use, which essentially is showing they have very little activity, except for pentamidine, which does have some, but is also extremely toxic and puts patients into multi-organ failure. So this was quite interesting. He published these results in 2018, and then he waited. And he happened to do a presentation to the FDA where I started messaging him frantically about his interest in drug repurposing. And we chatted. And so then when a patient eventually arrived at the UCSF hospital with balloneuthia, he sought to help get the physician get what's called an emergency IND, an investigational new drug application, which was required because the drug was approved in Europe, but not the US. Unfortunately, the first patient did not survive long enough to get the drug, but the second patient did. And so this patient was walked into San Francisco General with seizures and was eventually diagnosed as having balloneuthia. He was put on this crazy cocktail of 7 or 8 different drugs, which put him into multi-organ failure and all sorts of horrible side effects, and was continuing to deteriorate and was not able to withstand many of the treatments because of the toxicities. And so his physician, who was this very bright ID fellow, so a young trainee, Dr. Spottiswoode, Natasha Spottiswoode, went to the published literature, which is what most clinicians do when they don't know how to treat a patient. And she said, has anyone tried anything that I could potentially use to help my patient? And much to her surprise, she came across this paper by Joe DeRisi. And the irony of this was that Joe had actually interviewed Natasha for her fellowship at UCSF, but they didn't know that the other had been working. And so she came across this paper and she went, okay, my patient's likely to die without some other intervention. I'm going to try to get access to this drug. And so she obtained an emergency IND, and the patient was eventually treated with nitroxaline. It took them 45 days to get the drug shipped from China. And in most cases, patients don't have that long. But in this case, he survived long enough to receive the drug. And he showed really remarkable both clinical improvement, but also radiologic improvement, and was ultimately discharged alive to the community. Now, I like to joke that I'm not a doctor, and even I can look at this MRI and say, the one on the right looks a lot better than the one on the left, right? And that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, is this very clear signal that the drug had some effect. And this was, the regimen had been failing until they put him on this drug. So you're fairly certain that this was the drug that had an impact. Now, maybe it was in combination with the other treatments, but the reason I like to talk about this case is it's probably the clearest example we've ever seen of where all the stars sort of align. So he was discharged alive. And then I got a call. And it was actually, I don't normally check my voicemail for my office number. And I still to this day have no idea how this mother obtained my number, but I'm very glad she did. You know, where there's a will, there's a way. And so I had apparently been acknowledged in this article, which I didn't know. But it said this, you know, Heather Stone guided emergency authorization. And so when this little girl was infected with balamuthia, she was again put on the CDC recommended regimen and she was failing treatment. And I mean, they were having discussions about, you know, did she want to be buried with her teddy bears? Like it was really quite horrible. And she was not expected to survive. And so her mother, in desperation, reached out to everyone on this article. And I happened to respond. And she said, you know, I'm desperately trying to get a hold of nitroxyline. How can I get, you know, access to this drug? Um, and so we helped the physician who was treating her obtain this emergency IND again. But, you know, this little girl didn't have 45 days to wait for the drug to be shipped from China. And so we were fortunate that the review division was very accommodating and they really went out of their way to um, make it possible for her to receive the drug. So UCSF sent a bridge supply of the medication to the hospital where she was being treated within like a day of, you know, of her mom making the call, um, so that she could be started on treatment immediately. And she too had a truly remarkable response. And her mom sends me these amazing pictures of her, and it just is so touching to see her doing so well. And it really reinforces like this is why we're doing this, right? Is that we really think that this is a way to help patients who are out of options. So her follow-up MRIs have been good. She's been able to stop all of the treatments, including the nitroxyline. But the most interesting thing about this is that we have never actually been able to get the clinician to enter the case. But what happened was the mother called me and she said, you know, I don't want any other child to suffer the way that my child suffered. And so work with me and I'm going to enter the case myself. And so she sat there and she sent me the electronic health records and lists of medications. And we sat there and we entered the case. And that case is now available. And, you know, this is like an N of 2 experience, right? And so 50% of the experience has never been published. And so it's now available on CureID, and anyone anywhere can access the information, as well as additional details about, you know, they had to use an NG tube and they had to do this, that, and the other thing for her to be able to like keep the medication down. And so there were a lot of really interesting nuances that I don't think would have been communicated by the physician because they wouldn't have known about it. And so I'm so grateful to the mom for, you know, going through that and entering all of the information. Now, I will say, as much as this was an amazing experience, and I'm so glad that the little girl is doing well, there have been other patients who have received the treatment who have not survived. Some of them, we don't know whether they got it too late. Really, it probably doesn't work for everyone, and we don't know why. The latest information I have is that something like 50% of patients are responding to treatment with this drug. So it's not, you know, nothing is a miracle cure, right? And even the most effective treatments don't necessarily work for everyone. And so all the more reason that we need to continue searching. But even if it went from a 10% survival to a 30 or a 50% survival rate, like that's a huge advancement, right? And so you can go to the website, and I'm happy to share these slides later and check out the case for yourself. There's also, I hate showing this slide because it makes me really embarrassed, but there's Michael Lewis, the amazing author of The Blind Side and a bunch of other things, decided he's actually kind of obsessed with Joe DeRisi, the mad scientist who discovered nitroxyline. And so he was talking to Joe one day and he said, you know, he wanted to write a series about government in lieu of the new administration. And so he wrote up this story as a Washington Post article and then in a book called Who is Government? And it's a beautifully told story. If nothing else, he does, you know, does a lovely job of going through it. So I think, you know, some of the lessons from this are that like translating these discoveries takes time, right? This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen, and it still took 8 years to go from, you know, preclinical identification to like 2 patients being treated. And that's especially true for rare diseases. And I think anything that we can do to accelerate that timeline, and that's actually fast in terms of how long it normally takes. But anything we can do to accelerate that timeline, we need to do, because patients are suffering and, they need access to effective treatments as soon as humanly possible. I think in cases like this, case reports can bridge that gap, and help to sort of surface promising treatments when trials may not have been feasible or haven't yet been conducted. Ideally, we're in the haven't yet been conducted situation, but sometimes they're not feasible. My belief, at least, is that open data sharing can really accelerate learning and help to remove barriers to communicating this information, and that we can make people aware of potentially promising treatments faster and more widely. And that engagement drives impact, but that it's not up to just the doctors or just the parents or anyone, right? Everybody has a role to play. And each of you, that's listening to this, hopefully will be inspired to share your treatment experience or that of your child on CureID. So why we chose rare genetic disorders as a focus, and specifically SYNGAP1, it's really the engagement of communities like yours. I've been so impressed with the patients, the caregivers, the clinicians, advocacy groups that have been eager to partner with us and appreciate opportunities like this to talk to you all. We recognize, drug repurposing is already happening, right? Like, Virginia was talking about her own experience with this. And in many cases, there are even like really biologically plausible mechanisms and pathways that are being built on. And so we need to figure out a way to routinely capture this in a systematic way so that we can use that information to help get treatments to patients who need them. Obviously, there's a huge unmet need for treatment, and not enough dollars are being invested. The return on investment is often quite limited. And so I think the opportunity to explore particularly generic drugs to see where these may have activity beyond what had ever been recognized and could really benefit patients. And that's not going to happen from pharmaceutical companies because there's no return on investment there. And so I think it's up to government and advocates and philanthropy to do that. And I think recognizing that while there are limitations to case reports, they can be really valuable. And this is especially true in rare diseases where large trials and observational studies just are not necessarily going to be feasible, or are not going to happen until there's solid human data to support it. That just, a preclinical study or a mouse model may not be enough, and you may really want to see what happens in a patient. So how you can make a difference: share your child's treatment experience, please, on CureID. Help SYNGAP1 become one of the first demonstrations of the value of this platform for rare diseases, and be a part of our goal of turning treatment insights into action. It's not just you. Please tell your friends and encourage others to participate as well. There's so much power in numbers, and it is open to all conditions, especially all rare genetic diseases. So not limited to SYNGAP1, but I think there's such tremendous opportunity to work with this particular community. So I'm quite excited to work with you specifically. And then please feel free to connect us with other groups that might be interested in participating. So I don't know, Virginia, that's it. Help us turn these insights into action. Whether we want to take questions now and then do a demo, or want to do a demo and then take questions. What do you think would work best?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if you have any questions, please add them in the chat. I do have 2 questions that might help. So I saw clinicians and patients can can report cases. Do you recommend families to enter themselves and then share CureID with their physician as well? What's the best process here?
Yeah, so we do worry a little bit about duplication of case entry because we want to be sure that patients are only represented once. I think the reality is that very few clinicians have the time to enter the cases themselves. So what I would recommend is that you as a family enter the case, and then you perhaps share it with them as a resource to say, if they would like to see what others are trying, they can use the Explore feature to view the data there, but not necessarily suggest that they enter the case themselves, or say that, you have already entered your case. Now, some groups also want to sort of do it in tandem. So they, for example, will have the clinician enter some information and then they might choose to add information to that. It's a little bit complicated because it's de-identified, but there are ways that we can facilitate that if that's of interest.
So it's really the patients. So it's your voice. So and your experience that we want to hear from. And
Yep.
then the longitudinal aspect of it. So we're really pushing that in our community, and understanding that obviously the experience on treatment will change over time. How is that captured in QID? Do you want to give us that? And what's the recommendation on updating your case?
Yes, absolutely. So that's such an important facet, and I think something that's often overlooked. People can update their case at any time. So you actually go to your account and then click on My Submissions. And I am showing my screen, right?
Yeah.
Of the website. Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
And so these are just example cases, but you would click on these three dots and then choose Edit. And that allows you to go to your case and to make any updates. And what you can see is you can, for example, add additional medications. So I'm going to just put in fake data for a moment, but perhaps you had previously had a single drug entered. And if you see, I collect on this pencil icon, and that enables us to enter information like the duration. And so I can enter when the treatment was started, as well as how long it was taken for. And so that gives you some sense of the chronology and temporality. And you can also enter dosing information. We have both initial treatment and final treatment for dosing. So, oftentimes the dose starts low and goes high, or maybe it started high and somebody experienced a side effect and so it was reduced. And so this gives you the opportunity to add that change of information if you think that that's pertinent and relevant. But once I have entered this information, then let's say that I was coming back here for the first time after I had entered this information a couple of months ago and I wanted to add something again. So then I could just enter another drug. I'll just pick one and then I could do the same thing. And so I could add information about that drug. And so you can kind of have a sequential addition of information that you continuously add to. And you can also go back and edit, maybe the patient developed a side effect after you had entered the information that you want to share. And so again, you could use that pencil icon to edit it and go to the section on adverse events and say that, yes, now the patient did have a side effect. So that's how you can update information. And then just always be sure that you're pressing continue and that you go to the final review.
Submit. That is the step that I missed, guys. So please do not make the same mistake I made.
Because this is the IRB reviewed protocol, and we are not allowed to approve cases if they've only been saved, because we don't know whether the people actually meant to share the information or if they're doing what I did and just entered fake data. So.
No, that makes complete sense. And then the other question I have, or to clarify for the community, should people enter just all their medication, even if they're not on necessarily not experimental, but drugs that are just not just prescribed for not typically prescribed for Syngap. So if they're just on regular anti-seizure meds and SSRI and whatever,
Yep.
if they're on regular drugs, should they still go on QID and report that, or that should be just for more repurposing drugs? What is the
So I think you can do either, and different communities have handled it differently, actually. So, I mean, our original intent with it was more on the identifying the repurposing drugs.
Yep.
But if your community decides that there's value in capturing that information of more routinely, prescribed medications for things, I mean, it's yes, for like take seizure medications, right? So there's some nuance to like what does it mean to be a repurposed drug, right? So we say that it's like for a new indication, but a seizure med is not necessarily approved for seizures caused by SYNGAP1, right? They're approved for seizures generally. And so
Yeah.
we assume that they work for seizures caused by SYNGAP1, but that might actually not be true, right? It could be that, maybe some drugs work and other drugs don't work. So I think, if your community feels like there is value in adding those treatments and getting a sense of like whether, X, Y, and Z drug does in fact work for seizures caused by SYNGAP1, that's terrific. We're happy to approve the cases and have that information be collected. If you feel like, no, our resources are limited and we want to just focus on those things that are sort of, I joke, it's like
Yeah.
going the more extreme examples, right? The HIV drug that cured cancer, right? Versus like, one drug for epilepsy being used for a different kind of epilepsy. That's kind of up to the community. But I think that I think there's value in both. I think that we make a lot of assumptions about treatments, and from my own experience, I know that, just because a drug is approved for an overarching condition doesn't mean it's going to work for you, as an individual, and so that there's value in that. But it is, it takes time to enter the case, and I want to respect that.
Thank you. All right. If anyone has questions, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Now is your time.
Okay, well, maybe we can do a quick run through
Quick
of
demo. Yeah, that would be great.
how to enter the information. So I'm going to start with how to share your own treatment experience, since that's what we're really advocating today. So
Yep.
you'll see, we try to make it easy and say the two things that you can really do are to share your experience and explore what others have tried. So if you are choosing to share, you can either click here or you can click create at the top, but let's go to share. Now we have it split into therapeutic areas. And so you would select rare genetic disorders if you're reporting on SYNGAP. And then you could you start typing the information, and you'll see that SYNGAP1 related developmental and epileptic encephalopathy comes up as an option in the list. If you were entering a disease that did not appear in the list, you can type it and hit the enter key, and it will add it to the list. So you can always add something that's not there. And then you press continue. And then you can see we have some basic information about, how long it might take, which is that, sorry, it's highly variable depending on how much information you enter. The minimum information, you can read our FAQ documents. If you want to see something that's similar to the demo I'm just going to do now, you can watch these lovely videos of my smiling face. And we can get started. So you first report whether you are the patient, the care partner, or the healthcare provider. There are slightly different forms if you choose healthcare provider versus the other two. They mirror each other, but they just use different language, essentially. So we'll say in this case that I'm a care partner. And then we have an informed consent form, which just tells you, how does the platform work? What are we asking you to share? What we're collecting, information about your privacy and any risks, which should be quite minimal. But, anytime you're contributing information, there's a chance that it could be the privacy could be an issue. And then that, of course, your participation is totally voluntary, and where to go for help. And so please don't hesitate. If you have questions or would like assistance with entering your case, I have staff who are available to help sit there and enter it, just like I did for the mom with, the little girl with bowel-movemia. And like, we are more than happy to do that. Especially as we continue refining the usability of the platform. And then you just certify that you have to say that you're over 18 and that you agree to the terms, and then click agree. So then you would see our initial disease page, which is just saying that the disease that you're reporting is SYNGAP1, and hit continue. You can choose to enter or not enter this information. So all of these, like I said, other than the disease, the drug, and the outcome, everything is optional. So maybe I don't want to say how old the patient is, or maybe I don't know whether the patient was born prematurely or not. And so I might say that, but I'll select that, say the patient is, 6 to 10 years of age. I don't know whether they were born prematurely. I don't feel like answering that, so I'm going to skip that, and that they were born male. And then I would click continue. We ask about the country, and there are some questions that are triggered that are like if then sort of logic. So if you click that it was a patient in the US, then you get asked about race and ethnicity, whereas if you don't, then you don't get asked those questions because they're often defined differently. And then Really important. So the presentation is where you start entering information about the specific symptoms that the patient had and what they were being treated for. And you're going to use this later to enter the what they were being treated for part. So it's important that you add them here. So you click select, and then you can scroll down through a list of different symptoms that are organized essentially by organ system. So for example, cardiac, things affecting the heart, endocrine and growth issues, gastrointestinal issues, and you can choose to select one of the options or multiple options, or you can say that it's an other. So maybe they had some cardiac issue that is not in this very limited list of cardiac issues. And so you could click other, and then you would specify, you would type in whatever it is. You do have to type in something if you click other, or it won't work. So be aware of that. And you can select them from multiple areas. So maybe they had all sorts of problems, and we're going to click a whole bunch of things. So, okay. And then there is always an other option for things that are not like included above. So you could select that and put again. Once you've done that, you click continue. And there are questions about the pregnancy and whether there were fetal complications, which you can choose to answer or not answer. How the patient's condition was diagnosed. So, was it genetic testing done? And if so, what were the genes that were involved? If there was genetic testing and there were gene changes, what was the specific nucleotide and protein change? As I mentioned, maybe you are not sure how to enter this information, and that's absolutely fine. You'll have the option at the end to add, to upload a document. So you could upload your genetic testing report, for example, if you prefer, and then we can extract the information on your behalf and enter it. Okay, and then the most fun part, the medications. So this is where you would, again, just start typing a drug name. So I'm put in something totally. Sorry, there are so many options for like doxycycline, and you get 100 different doxycyclines. Pick the simplest one, but we're working on mapping it so that it will be simpler. What happened was we added electronic health record data during COVID, and it completely destroyed our drop-down list because it added all these variants of things. So, and the thing that you must learn, which is totally unintuitive, and I apologize in advance, is to enter the information about the outcome. You have to click this pencil icon. So we are working on refining this so that the usability is better. But for those of you who are first to the party, you please click the pencil icon. So you could choose to add information about the dosing and duration of, like I showed before, the initial and final dose if you want, and then if they experience any side effects. And then the most important part is this section, the primary target and response. And this is where you would enter the outcome. So the options that you selected previously from the presentation are now appear in the drop-down list, and it's only the things that you previously added. So if you realize you forgot something, you have to go back to that part of the form and add it. But you would select whatever the primary reason that the patient's doctor prescribed the drug was, what they were trying to treat. And then you would say whether it worked or not. Did the patient improve? Did they recover completely? Did they actually get worse? Maybe their condition was unchanged. And please report things that worked, things that didn't work, things that were unclear whether they worked or not. Like, it's not limited to just you had a miracle response, right? Every experience is important and can help to inform further research, as well as what patients receive as treatment. So, and then what were the signs of improvement or deterioration if you clicked improved? And then this is also like, sometimes people have effects on symptoms other than what the patient was, or what the doctor was trying to treat. So for example, in Noonan syndrome, we hear about, patients being treated with trametinib for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy as an example. And that's what they were intentionally treating. But as a result, their stature, like, they started growing in unexpected ways. And so you could say, yes, that it affected another symptom or presentation. You would click add another effect, and then you would choose, growth. So that is an option if you want to add a secondary. And then it's useful to know how long it took to notice a response to treatment. So, was it a week? Was it a month? Was it 10 years? So you can enter that information. And then we always sort of like to have a free text where you can add a narrative description if there is information that you don't feel like was adequately collected, or if you just kind of want to tell the story of what happened. This is your chance to do this in this section. And then you would hit continue again. You would say whether you want a reminder. So to Virginia's point earlier about, longitudinal data. So maybe you want to be reminded to update your case every 3 months. So you can select that and it will send you an email reminder. Or you could say, no, you don't want a reminder. And then if you wanted to add an image, this is where you would do that. And then the last step is that you review the information, sort of this final summary page. You can also print this out. So like if you want to take this to your doctor and say like, hey, here's, information on what happened to my kid or myself, you could do that if you so chose. And then, like I said, key to click the submit button. So once you do that, then the reverse side of this is the ability to explore. So you could go from the home page and you could select explore here, or you can select it from the top menu bar. And it's organized, again, this is all diseases. So you could search for SYNGAP1 here, or you can look at just the rare genetic disorders and see a more limited set of diseases that are currently included, in which SYNGAP is one of them. That's interesting.
It's me. I just resubmitted it because I added I added some updates to my report. It's my fault. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. See, this is good. You can go in and update it. So I will look at it after we're done here and I will reapprove it. And then there will be 2
Sorry.
pieces.
I messed up the presentation.
No, you did not. It's absolutely fine. So you would see here the drugs that have been used broken down by outcomes. So in this case, there's just one drug and one outcome. So it's not a very exciting graph, but it gets more exciting the more you have. You can
It was excited. It was exciting before I messed it up 5 minutes ago. Sorry.
You can see the details of the specific case. And then if you click on the case report card, what we call that card, which is each individual case report, then you can see the full details that were entered. In this case, it was actually by a doctor, but in other cases, it would be by another parent or child. Or the patient themselves, rather. And then on the left, you have the ability to filter. So maybe you only want to see cases that were submitted by patients and caregivers, or you only want to see those that had a particular medication that was used, for example. So you can scroll and select any of the different options for the ability to filter those cases. Now, of course, all of that requires there to be lots of cases in the platform so that you can utilize those filters to the maximum capacity. So again, please submit your case. And you can always do that by creating new. I think that covers the demo. Have any additional questions come to?
I don't believe so.
Everybody is being quiet.
Very quiet. That means you did a really good job explaining, and it's really straightforward.
Well,
It's
thank you. I'm glad
straightforward. I think Zoe has a question. You have to type. I don't know if I can. Do you want to type your question, Zoe? Oh, there he goes. Perfect.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
Thank you so much. I just did it today before this webinar. I thought I wasn't sure how to do it, but it was really easy. And I really appreciate it. And it felt smooth and intuitive. I guess you haven't been able to check it because I just did it like an hour ago. So maybe there are a lot of mistakes, but the way I did it, it seemed good. And yeah, just excited to have this platform
Thank you
to
so
talk
much.
about
No,
it.
I'm really delighted to hear it. We did work really closely with actually a bunch of we chose rhizopathies as the first therapeutic area that we focused on to sort of pilot this in when we expanded from infectious diseases to rare genetics. And we worked really closely with a bunch of parents of rhizopathies, kids with Noonan syndrome especially. and as well as a lot of clinicians. And so I think that that's been so valuable because it's helped to make it more user friendly, although I'm always of the opinion that it can always be better. So, but I'm really glad to hear that it went smoothly for you, and I'm excited to review your case. I will do that probably tonight. And then, yes, and then it will be visible. And you should get an email letting you know that once it's been approved. And
It did say something like, should we be contacted like every so often?
oh, it's there's a reminder question whether you would like to be reminded to update your case. So if you want to be contacted every 3 months with a reminder to go in and add any new details to your case, you can do that, but it's completely optional. You don't have to. It can be one and done if you prefer. But to Virginia's point about the longitudinal data, I certainly would not remember to do this recurringly. So we try to build in reminders to help people.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions. And like Zoe said, it's super easy. It's the hardest was because I entered all of our drugs on top of the one that I really wanted to share my experience. And it was remembering the dose that we started on. But for that, we have the citizen data. So it's just easy to go back on that with that platform. So it should all be
Excellent.
at your fingertip, guys. Oh, Jaime has a question.
Do you see the Q&A down there?
Oh, now I can. Oh, there he goes. Now I can. Is a platform for US residents only? I think she said it was international, but
it is global. Yep. Anyone, anywhere can participate. It is unfortunately only in English right now. We would love to have it in other languages, but that's a future goal. But most of the information could be pretty readily put into Google Translate and or is intuitive. We actually do have people enter it sort of in, we've had Portuguese versions of drugs entered, and I Google it and make sure I got the right thing. But so feel free to enter it, even if English is not the language that you choose.
and the drug, obviously, I mean, I entered a drug that is not available in the US, and it took it, no problem.
Yes. So again, with that, just like with the disease, you would enter the drug and then click the enter key on your keyboard, and then it would add it to the list.
Yep. All right. I think that's all the questions.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Well,
so
hopefully
much.
it was crystal clear.
Yeah, we'll keep pushing, we'll keep promoting, so hopefully we see more cases.
Yes. I'm
And
excited to see them.
yeah, same.
No, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And I hope to see lots of cases of Syngap.
Yeah, learn more about what's out there, what's helping our kids.
Exactly. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.